felt through realization and piety, so many different other things. But to be able to describe the unlimited by the limited languages that are out there, what to speak of anything, Sanskrit, the most complicated and accusative language that can present actual knowledge, is not even sufficient to describe the absolute truth. This is also expressed by the following statement in Sruti. Tam tvapapanatham purusham pachami. I am acquiring about that Supreme Person revealed in the Upanishads, specifically the Sri Ishupanishad, which is the Upanishad number 1. And it establishes in 18 verses the facts of the absolute truth. It exists both in a numinal way that we can see and understand because of our limits. Therefore, we see the deities very nicely. Radhanila Madhava dressed beautifully. Do we see him dancing with Radharani this morning? Probably not. Right? But that's the difference between material and spiritual. Same absolute truth, different capacity upon the describer or the seeker or any other way you want to describe that person. If the absolute truth were actually inaccessible by words, there would be no meaning to the Vedic literature, which consists of collections of transcendental words. Since the Vedic descriptions of the truth are to be taken as infallible, it is impossible to maintain that the power of speech is in all cases unable to describe the truth. After all, the Vedic mantras themselves are meant to be spoken and heard. Therefore, the injunction themselves that neither the mind nor the speech can approach the absolute truth, naitanmano vishati vaguta, cannot be taken as applicable in all cases. Rather, it is a warning to those who foolishly try to encompass the absolute truth by their own puny speculative powers. Since the Vedic injunctions, either positive or negative, are to be taken as realistic descriptions of the absolute truth, the process of hearing and repeating Vedic knowledge, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, can be understood as a separate process in which one's hearing and speaking power becomes spiritualized by submissive reception of transcendental knowledge. This process depends upon one's faith in the bona fide spiritual master, who is a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore it is stated, Yasi Devi Parabhaktir Yata Devi Tata Guru Tasjaiti Kahita Harata Prakashashanti Mahat Manaha. And I apologize, I'm not letting everybody else read, but this is still a difficult and rather lengthy purport. So let me just read and speak a little bit, and then we'll try to tie the 2 days together. Thank you. Only unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master are all the imports of the Vedic knowledge automatically revealed. Svetasvatara Upanishad 6:23. As the Lord himself states in the Harivangsha, Tat param paramam brahma sarvan vihajate jagat mamaiva tad gananan tejo Gantumarasi Bharata. That supreme truth, Para Brahman, expands itself into all the variegatedness of this universe. You should know it to be my own concentrated effulgence, O Bharata. The words Gatum Arhasi, you must know it, spoken by the Lord himself, indicate that the absolute truth is to be known, but one must surrender to the truth rather than waste time in foolish speculation. Very important understanding. It is actually the mercy of the Vaishnavas, specifically starting from the Guru and full faith in Guru, that we begin to understand in faith that absolute truth. Right? And the beginning of that is to know that you can never be separated from that absolute truth because everything rests on him, as it's described here, in his concentrated Brahman. The Brahman effulgence Brahmanmeti encompasses everything, and when it becomes concentrated as Krishna's various energies within the material world, we begin to become conscious of it. And it is faith in the spiritual master that allows us to believe that which we cannot perfectly describe. And the best example of that is Dhruv Maharaj. He was doing such great austerities that when he, in his asana, he was standing on one leg. When he pushed down on his big toe, the earth would vibrate. It would literally rock in its orbit. Sure, we don't have to believe that. He's only 5 years old. It still happened. This is the power of connection purely in faith with that complete spiritual energy emanating from Krishna. However, in addition to this contemplation here about how you can describe the Lord, he couldn't. In spite of all that power and spiritual tejas, he could not do anything but look lovingly at the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. Until, what happened? Come on, 4th canto, everybody should have read that far. Huh? Until the Lord touched him on the head with his conch shell, wherein Dhruva immediately began to express beautiful, exacting prayers of his vision of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay? Full faith in the spiritual master brought him to the darshan of the Supreme Lord, standing right in front of him, smiling, pleased that his great devotee Dhruva at 5 years of age was able to perfect his spiritual life. We certainly missed that one. That's when I started water skiing, which broke most of the bones in my back, and I'm suffering miserably for it now. Though I certainly enjoyed it at the time, that's what I was doing at 5 and 6 years old. Yeah, it didn't work. Dhruva, in his anger and his desire to be even stronger than his father, to have a bigger kingdom than his father. Pretty mundane goals, I mean, you know. I want a kingdom on earth bigger than Brahma has on earth or anywhere in the universe, right? But with those material desires attached to the determination to get the blessing of the Supreme Personality Godhead to achieve such boons. Now that's the other thing about being 5 years old. He had nothing to compare it to. Srinardamuni said this, he accepted it. Same thing happened to Srinardamuni. He accepted what the sages said, and therefore he simply was able to act in full faith of the instructions of his spiritual master. See this connection. It goes all the way through the Bhagavatam. And now, as we know, these answers of the Nava-yogendra, the 9 yogendras, the sons of Rishabdev. He had a lot of sons, but this was 9 of them. Great sages, fully conscious of the supreme spiritual absolute truth. They're recapping the steps, the actions of the devotees of the Lord that actually have full faith in Guru and Krishna, wherein they can understand and experience the supreme absolute truth in any form in which the Lord wishes to reveal himself. Hare Krishna. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has pointed out that according to the authorized statements of Vedic literature, the Lord's transcendental form is understood to be Brahmanya, Brahmamaya, or completely spiritual with no trace of material contamination. Therefore, in such statements as Nilot, Pala, Dala, Shamam, the Lord's form is beautifully manifest with the hue of the dark blue lotus petals. It is understood that a transcendental dark blue color is being described. Still, The Lord is inconceivably merciful to his devotee, even those on the neophyte platform who are trying to come to the state of love of Godhead. Therefore, the Lord gradually purifies the senses of a conditioned soul who is trying to understand him. And eventually, the Lord appears before such a rectified servitor. According to Srila Vishwanath Thakur, Pakrita Nilotpala Varnatvena Bhaktir Dayatam Adhad Drisham Api. In the beginning, being conditioned by previous materialistic activities, a devotee meditating on the Lord's transcendental form may base his meditation on his experience of material forms and colors within this world. The Lord's transcendental form has nothing to do with material forms and colors, but since the object of this meditation is Krishna, such meditation will eventually be transformed into transcendental experience of the actual form, color, activities, pastimes, and entourage of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, transcendental knowledge depends on the material logic, not on material logic, but on the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If the Lord is pleased by his devotee's sincere attempt to understand him, the Lord can immediately circumvent all so-called technicalities of material logic and Vedic injunctions and reveal himself to his pure devotee. Unless one accepts this omnipotency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no hope of approaching the absolute truth. Therefore, it is stated in the Katha Upanishad 1.3.12, Driste Tvangraya Bhuja. The absolute truth is seen by transcendental intelligence. Okay, now the Bhagavad Gita explains this in the 12th chapter very succinctly. Surrender unto me. But if you cannot do that, follow the practices of Bhakti Yoga and you will develop a desire to obtain me. At this point, you start using not the material logic or regulations or transcriptions of what is the process of learning Bhakti Yoga by engaging everything in the Lord. It's mechanical material logic. If you do this and this and this, you can become purified. If you become purified, you can, in fact, engage 24 hours in the service of the Lord. At that point, it becomes the Lord's mercy that he wishes to reveal himself to you and will, at that point, at his pleasure, not because you've mechanically gotten to a certain level of spiritual understanding. Nardamuni, 5 years old, meditates on the Supreme Lord. He appears before him. He gives him instructions. And he said, wow, that was cool. And then he sits down to meditate again because he wanted that experience again. And he tried, and he tried, and he tried, and he tried, and nothing changed. Then he heard the Lord's voice again in the sky. It said, you won't see me again in this life. Therefore, stop trying to think this is a material process. Right? And therefore, Narada goes through his entire life simply surrendering to the desires of the Supreme Lord. And in doing that, his next appearance was as the Saint Srinardamuni, who Prabhupada describes in the second canto as having a very unique method of bhakti. It's not like anyone else's bhakti. And he goes throughout the universe giving that mercy to the devotees who have earned it and surrendered to him. Therefore, they will be able to receive the mercy of the Lord. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has pointed out that knowledge acquired through interaction of the material senses with the modes of nature is merely hypothetical and not factual. Empirical knowledge deals with our ephemeral experience of the sense objects generated by material nature. Therefore, we use material examples to describe Krishna's color, right? Okay. And it's usually, they use the dark blue lotus flower, which, has anyone ever seen a dark blue lotus flower? You have? Good for you. Where? Okay. I haven't, and I researched lotus flowers for about 6 months one time, and went to the gardens that are maintained by Texas A&M, who produce lotuses to grow in this area. I've been to Vrindavan, I've been other places where I've seen lotus. I've never seen a dark blue one. They only open at night, from what I've been told, and the fragrance is completely intoxicating. That didn't happen to me either. Huh? Yeah, well, maybe. Let's see. But Krishna's this color, because that is such a rare event to see such a dark blue lotus flower, that he's described like a monsoon cloud. Big, deep, dark, high cloud, doesn't let the sun shine in, but only a certain way. And that color, which we may be able to see this next week coming when a hurricane rolls in, somewhere around the Gulf Coast, we may get that vision of what that color is. It's called Sham, and it's only a description of the color of Krishna as far as we can get it. Because the beauty of a cloud, a storm cloud coming in like that, is that it is such an exotic color of blue. It's violet, it's black, it's blue, it's the sunlight streaking through, so all the other colors of the rainbow are also present there, right? And right behind that beauty of this color is the actual power of the storm. So it's a little frightening too. So you can't just appreciate the beauty separated from the power that's coming, and it makes that color, it only exists within that type of a powerful situation, as in the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's not ordinary. So, here we get to learn a little bit about what we're going through these days. Empirical knowledge deals with our ephemeral experience of the sense objects generated by material nature. For example, there are many wars currently going on because of a false concept of nationalism. Similarly, there is a conflict throughout the world, and great world leaders fight like cats and dogs for the economic development of their countries. Thus, material language is used to designate temporary objects perceived by the eyes, nose, tongue, touch, and taste. This type of language and experience is useless for approaching the absolute truth. But the transcendental sound from the spiritual sky has a completely different effect. We should not foolishly try to use materially concocted language to include the Supreme Personality of Godhead as an object of the material world. The Supreme Lord is completely transcendental and is known as Atma Prakasha, or self-manifested. Therefore, as stated in the Padma Purana, Atasi Krishna nabared gayam indriyai sevan mukhe hijivados vayam eva sparatyada. Material senses cannot appreciate Krishna's holy name, form, qualities, and pastimes. But when a conditioned soul is awakened to Krishna consciousness and renders service by using his tongue to chant the Lord's holy name and taste the remnants of the Lord's food, the tongue is purified, and one gradually comes to understand who Krishna really is. This is the potency of prasadam. And this is also described very beautifully in Bhakti Vinod Thakur's song for the honoring of prasadam, Saridada Vijajal, etc. And if we can control the tongue to taste Krishna and get that taste with faith and determination, we can again be able to control the rest of our sensual experiences. The tongue is the most difficult to control according to Bhakti Vinod Thakur. And I know that many a times people have prayed that I could somehow get a filter installed on my tongue so I don't speak some of the things that I speak out of place. People that know me. Anyway. So, if one surrenders to the Supreme Lord, taking shelter at His lotus feet, one is spiritualized. Senses gradually become empowered to perceive the Lord. Mere empiricism and material logic have a limited jurisdiction within this external energy of the Supreme Lord and cannot apply to those things which are eternal. In this regard, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has quoted the following verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 7.5.32. Naisham matistavad uru kramangram Sparshatyanar tatha pagamo yad artha mahi yasam padadarjo visekam nishi kinchananam na vrinita nirvat. Unless they smear upon their bodies the dust of the lotus feet of a Vaishnava completely freed from material contamination, persons very much inclined towards materialistic life cannot be attached to the lotus feet of the Lord, who is glorified for His uncommon activities. Only by becoming Krishna conscious and taking shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord, in this way can one be freed from material contamination. Although Pipalayana is expressing that the absolute truth cannot be approached by material senses, the sage himself is describing the absolute truth with transcendental senses. And King Nimi is able to understand this transcendental sound because he has surrendered at the lotus feet of the pure devotees, the Navayogendras. Therefore, one should not foolishly try to understand this verse out of context in an impersonal way, but should follow the example of King Nimi, who was trying to understand how the Supreme Personality of Godhead is ultimately the source of everything. Wonderful. Om Jnana Tamarandasya Ganandana Salakaya Chakshunmanitam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Varaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutalaya Srimate Tamal Krishna Goswami Niti Namane. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pachanane Nirave Sesha Sunyabari Paskatadi Satarane. There it is. How to actually understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead and all of His potencies and features with whatever we have available with us in this material energy. Now, there are several things that go on in the first half of this purport that also, because it's long and detailed, wasn't talked about. And I found it very fascinating and interesting that the negative injunctions of the Vedas apply only in very specific circumstances, and therefore they are not to be considered a permanent situation. In other words, yes, it is true, the Vedas say we cannot understand spiritual, transcendental activities, existence, or anything of the sort with our material senses. Neither can we use material verbiage of any language to actually describe the transcendental features of the Supreme Lord. So this says we can't do it. But the Vedas also say the Lord is nirguna. Nirguna means near, not, guna, senses. But the Lord has no senses, no factual things that we have. And the Mayavadis jump on these type of topics to say, yes, this is true. The Lord is nirguna. Therefore, He has no real senses. He only exists for some little while within this material experience to do something somewhere with somebody. And then He goes away. And to justify this, the Mayavadis, according to the 7th chapter of the Adi Lila, explain, well, Vyasadeva made a mistake. Sure. That's easy to use if we choose. Just like we can use any of these things in the Vedas, which we're studying, the commentary on the commentary of the Vedas, Srimad Bhagavatam, which has the essence of Vedantic thought, which is the supreme absolute truth is all we have to accomplish. Anything we're doing in this world is our faith in Guru and Krishna, and it will be given to us as we purify that desire and absorb ourselves 24-hour days in simply approaching Krishna. Right? Vyasadeva is the literary incarnation of the Lord. He does not make mistakes. So it is not possible to understand the Vedas without first accepting the Supreme Personality of Godhead produced them in such a way that non-religious, non-personal seekers of the Absolute Truth will ever understand them. And because they can't defeat the philosophy that Veda Vyasa is presenting here, they say, well, he made a mistake in his judgment. After all, he started this whole, even when he finished, he was morose, right? Because he must have thought, yeah, I did something, still didn't quite get it. Not true. This is just to help the Mayavadis and other people who do not accept the truth of the Vedas, who do not accept the truth of the Absolute Personality of Godhead, can understand him. Keeps them out of the way. Now, unfortunately, there is not a person on this planet, practically speaking, who has not been contaminated by this impersonal doctrine. The Western religions have no concept of God as the absolute truth. They only have a concept of God's superiority over everything we can experience. God is great. God is the creator. God is the ultimate father. God is this. God is that. But they do not say he is the absolute truth because they don't know the absolute truth. The Mayavadis make up stories and conjectures because they know who's going to read the Vedanta Sutra, who's going to read the Vedas. The last person to know the entire full Vedas was Vyasadeva himself, because he took 1/4 of the Vedas and taught 4 different disciples that 1/4 of the Vedas. This 1/4 to this one, this 1/4 to that one, this 1/4 to 4 of his disciples. They got 1/4 of the Vedantic teachings. So as there's no one else since Vyasadeva that actually fully understands the Vedic literature. And that is proven in the first canto of the Bhagavatam, because the first canto of the Bhagavatam builds our faith in the Srimad Bhagavatam itself. It teaches why it has appeared, when it appeared, that it is completely perfect, having issued from Vyasadeva after fully accepting the teachings of his spiritual master, Srinardamuni. Now, how does the Supreme Personality of Godhead have a spiritual master? Because if he does not do everything properly, people will find fault and they will never come to the conclusion that, yes, this is the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as described again and again and again through this Bhagavatam. But it takes 9 cantos, which is basically, in the original printing, 30 volumes. This, 400 pages each, just to get to the point of starting to understand Krishna by description of Krishna himself. And that's another 30 books. 90 chapters. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing that Srila Prabhupada has been able to present this philosophy so concisely and beautiful that after 5,000 years of the degradation of human society in Kali Yuga, we get it. I mean, it can be summed up simply by full faith in Guru and Krishna. One can understand everything one needs to understand in the Vedic literatures in order to approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Absolute Truth. That's astounding. Actually, it's not material. And until we give up our material constrictions of this philosophy and these teachings, we can't know them in full. Therefore, they're described in ways that we can at least relate our mind and intelligence to them, so that we can, within the process of our purification, with our actual desire being love of Godhead and service in love of Godhead, that's what we're going for. Purification is a byproduct, but it's required, because we have to stop any and all mundane activities in order to become transcendently situated so that you can see and understand the Supreme Lord as He wishes you to. And then only you're going to get what the Lord allows you to have. But the Lord will help you anywhere along the way and after that point to where if you ever need any piece of information about the Lord, you will understand it and be able to present it to persons who are not so transcendently situated and enliven them to take up that process of bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga is the process of rendering devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We heard that at the beginning of the 11th canto, 2.5 chapters ago. But we also heard that the goal is to elevate ourselves to pure devotional service. Not just devotional service, pure devotional service, which can only be done on the spiritual platform. Because you can't even approach the Supreme Lord until you've thus accepted His transcendental position and your ability to understand that on the basis of the Lord's pleasure with your activities in the realm of devotional service by engaging our material senses and thoughts in His lotus feet, in the service of His lotus feet. And at that point, when He chooses to reveal Himself to you in full, to your ability to comprehend, He will, and can and has done repeatedly throughout history. But it's a little rare in this Kali Yuga that we come to that point. 4 million people in the surrounding area, and we don't even have 20 in the temple room. It's a little rare for anyone to even be interested. And how fast does it degrade? What did Krishna say in the Bhagavatam? Sahasranam sahasreshu kachanya, that out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection. Of all those who actually achieve perfection in devotional service, hardly one knows Krishna in truth. He said that some 5,000 years ago, right? When he spoke the Bhagavad Gita, which was some years prior to the battle, prior to the actual advent of Kali Yuga. In the appearance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he spoke almost an identical verse to Rupa Goswami in the Rupa Siksha. And what was that verse? He said that out of many millions among people that may engage in devotional service, hardly one will perfect that. And out of that one, those few that get to that point, many millions of those, one may actually understand Krishna. So it went from thousands to millions. That's a big leap. And how rare is pure devotional service placed upon people. Now, just to show a little efficacy in the transcendental truth of the Bhagavatam, I just received a little message that was quoted from the 12th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam that says the unqualified leaders of civilization will be so ruthless towards the citizenry under them. They will so much damage and destroy civilization by stealing through taxation and other ways from the populace that they will run away to the mountains and the forest. Right? We all heard that, right? There was a news quote describing the citizenry of Afghanistan, that the people in the villages and etc., as the Taliban were retaking control of the country, were running off to the forest and the mountains to hide from the governors of their newly acquired Taliban state. I mean, it's like almost a direct quote from the Bhagavatam. Now, it may not be happening here, but it appears to be happening there. I mean, it literally it puts both the news quote and the quote from the Bhagavatam side by side. And it's like, whoa. Because when we read this Bhagavatam, when we read this 12th canto, we realize, yes, that will happen way off into the future. But it's happening now. And it will happen repeatedly. Right? On an economic level in this world that we live in America, which doesn't have this kind of situation happening. The commerce, the economics of commerce is calculated on the basis of profit. Who makes profit in a corporation? Can anyone say? I know several of you come from that field, but who makes profits in the corporation? Huh? I can't hear. The owners of the corporation, the board of directors, they receive portions of the profit. What does everybody else in the corporation receive? Wages and salaries, which is the basis of the average. The bulk of economic understanding is that the workers get paid for their money, for their time that they put into the company. The owners experience profit. It's very different. You may be making more money than you need, and therefore you can contemplate it as being profit, but it's not. It's just your wages and salaries and benefits. You're not actually making profit. The company, on the other hand, is making profit from your actions. Because if they're not making 3 times what you're making, they're not interested in having you around because you're not making them profit, no matter how much salary they pay you. This is economics 101. Everybody learns it the first semester, at least in America. That's the only college I know about. They learn that in the first semester. But it doesn't connect because economics has its own weird little language that means different things to the average person. Like scarcity is good for profit. But for the average living entity, scarcity means they're missing something. It's completely opposite understanding. Right? We think we make profits because we make more money than we spend. That's not profit. That's just you're being conservative. You could have spent all that money, and people do. I had a bunch of money one time. A bunch of money in my world is a little different from a lot of people's. But I was asking all these people in big houses where I was doing certain work that I was doing there and getting paid my wages and salaries, right? And I asked them, what would you do if you had this amount of money? And these people in big $500,000 homes said, I'd never had that much money. So I don't actually know. The best advice I got was from another fellow, nice house, big house, younger man, 40s. He said, invest in what you know. Because at least you can understand what the possibility is of actually making a profit by this investment. That's profit. That's not wages. But these are people in really big, expensive neighborhoods around the area of Houston. And so many of them had nothing to say. They're simply acquiring wages and salaries to live in this world. And that's as good as the material world will ever get. Therefore, the people in this room have accepted that this is not our home. Therefore, we take faith, we give faith in the spiritual master a chance to change our reasoning for living in this material world. The only reason we are here is to perfect ourselves in devotional service so that we will no longer live in this material world. Everything else we do in this material world will not get us out. We will just take birth again, maybe in a better or worse situation. That's up to Krishna. It's actually up to the KKK, as Mukunda Datta once described it. Your karma, the activities you performed, your karma, the desires you still hold dear to your heart, and the kripa of Krishna, KKK. It's weird because there's so much negative connotation to that, but that's the difference between spirit and matter. KKK in the material world means a bunch of ignorant, proud persons who are willing to harass and subject anyone else they find as their enemy in misery and horrible conditions. Whereas KKK in the spiritual sense will give you the birth you desire. It's a boon from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is what we're talking about here. The material senses, the material contemplations, all of these things do not work on the spiritual level, whereas the spiritual ideals and philosophies and understandings, the Supreme Absolute Truth, can save you from the material condition. It will deliver you from the material condition to spiritual realization and ultimately life in the spiritual world. Questions or comments? Okay, Gantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Tomorrow we will leave the verse 36 and go to verse number 37, and that will be Mother Seva Priya, or Seva Priya Prabhu, sorry. Learn things. It's getting harder. I don't know, so Seva Priya Prabhu will be speaking tomorrow on a verse that again starts off with originally one, the Absolute Brahman, comes to be known as threefold. So now we'll begin to understand how we see the Lord in various aspects within this material world as we turn transcendently towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it's got a big purport. So, get ready for some real gracious and wonderful philosophy. Hare Krishna. Not only that, but most of the other people here are afraid of that. When you give a class in that tone of voice, I'm not asking them anything.
That was great.
Solves the whole dilemma. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.